Hello, everyone. I'm Dr. Lisa Piper here with my business partner, Wendy Cohn-Osborne, and a special guest, John Fullbright. We are hosting the C3 podcast today, Code Conscious Conversations. So, John, tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about that pivotal moment in your life that sparked the journey to where you are now.
Spark is the ultimate word of the day. So essentially, I made my living as an outdoor adventure professional. I have a degree in adventure travel, actually, from Humboldt State. Spent 30 years traveling the world, doing photography, adventure expeditions, mountaineering, ski mountaineering, river running, all these kinds of things. 2004, I was coming out of a very difficult marriage, wanted to meet my destiny. So I vision quest, walkabout, so to speak. And 3 days into it, I was near a lightning storm in Bridger Bowl, Montana, and had this conversation going after the lightning storm had passed over. I was kind of like talking to the universe about needing direction and very earnestly asked that if I needed to take this path, I needed a really direct sign, like being hit by lightning would be sufficient. And within a few seconds, actually, the last bolt of lightning we saw that day jumped out of the sky and hit the ski lift next to me, came out of the bottom of the lift, went into my right leg, and then came through my body, shot out my right arm, and made this massive red ball of light about the size of a big vehicle sitting in front of me. And I just thought to myself, wow, I'm kind of having this audience with creation here. As I sat listening to my heartbeat, sound of electricity all around, staring at this beautiful red light in front of me, it turned blue at my wrist and it shot about 1,000 feet out of me into another ski lift. So I essentially fused together two 5,000-foot cables. Wasn't unconscious at all, just felt kind of slightly burned. People asked me, what was it like? And honestly, it felt like getting stung by two bees, which I thought was really interesting. After receiving those burns, internally, I started having a lot of difficulties digesting, holding food down. Over the next 10 years, I lost 60 pounds, couldn't hold food down, vomited for over a year and a half. I had to rebuild my gut, basically, and figure out ways to survive. I wasn't sure I was going to make it. My fingernails were incredibly soft. My ligaments were all weak. I just wasn't gaining any muscle, and I was just basically evaporating. And it was in this process that I really felt a calling to just a complete reset in my life, and that I had a new direction if I could survive this thing. And in that process, I learned internal organ acupressure called Ampuku from Japan, organ acupressure. And I've found that that helped get my system regular. I started getting a lot of massage therapy to get my appetite up. One thing led to the next, and 10 years later, by 2014, I had recovered from the lightning quite well, was gaining weight again and feeling pretty good. But then I had new symptoms that began to attack, and I wasn't sure what I was dealing with. I had systemic arthritis. I started having tremors. I couldn't remember anything. Started getting really easily angered, having no thermal regulation, tremors all night, couldn't turn my nerves off. And then I started losing vision in my left eye. And then I realized something's really bad here. I started diving deep. I saw a kinesiologist. They muscle tested me and said, I hate to tell you, but you got Lyme disease. And I was like, Lyme disease? Like, the only tick bite I'd ever seen on me was when I was like 12 years old. So as I researched what I was dealing with, it became pretty clear that I likely did have Lyme disease. The symptoms were insane. And my skin was erupting, constantly itching, feeling like there was glass under the skin, all kinds of crazy symptoms. I ended up getting a blood test to confirm what the kinesiologist had said. And sure enough, I had Borrelia burgdorferi and 5 other co-infections, Babesia, Rocky Mountain relapsing fever, a whole bunch of stuff. And they said I'm going to have to be on antibiotics the rest of my life. Well, after 10 years of taking care of my gut biome and rebuilding it after the lightning, I wasn't about to just start eating handfuls of antibiotics. So I looked around. I talked to a clinic in Arizona. They wanted about $300,000 for me to get treated for my symptoms. They didn't take insurance, and I didn't have it anyway. And so I just thought, well, I don't know what I'm going to do. Maybe I'm just going to die. And that's when a friend of mine came to me and said, hey, there's this woman in Santa Fe, Sensei Voice Durling Jones. that had learned an ancient Japanese method called Hoshindo of applying bee venom like acupuncture. And I thought, well, what's a bee going to do? So I went down to Santa Fe. I tried my first treatment, and within 5 minutes, I could feel my nerves calming down. I could feel my thermal regulation coming online. I felt like, oh my God, I'm going to live. And I literally committed in the first 5 minutes of my first treatment to become a practitioner of bee venom acupuncture, otherwise known as Hoshindo. Incredible relief from the first 5 minutes, but then the effects would wear off quickly. So I told my teacher at the time, voice sensei, I said, hey, well, she's only going to be around for 2 more weeks. So I said, well, let me come every day for 11 days. And so I came every day to her from Santa Fe to Taos. I drove down there, and every time she treated me, I just felt better and better. By the end of 2 weeks, I had quite a lot of lymph swelling, lymph in my armpits. I just was detoxing heavily, but I found that I wasn't having the big Herxheimer's that a lot of people talk about. I was just getting like a sore throat and lymph were swelling, but I was sleeping like a baby. My nerves had calmed down. It was the first time I felt literally refreshed in maybe 5 years. And I noticed by morning after my first treatment, I could smell again. I was smelling the cupboard. I could smell spices. I could smell dirty diapers. I mean, I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. And so just needed to keep doing the treatments and then go deeper and learn the methods. So, yeah.
Amazing. It's amazing how I think that's what happens to so many people. They experience something, and whatever happens to them that's negative, they turn into something positive. And here you are, you've turned your life's work into treating people with bee venom. And that's actually how Lisa and I met you. And I think what I would want to know is, what is the best part of doing what you do? Because you see so many people and you treat so many people and help so many people.
That's really it. It's my whole life, I've always wanted to contribute to things. And being a river guide, I was assisting people and having good times. But in this day and age, Lyme disease is incredibly difficult to diagnose, incredibly difficult to get rid of. And so the best part for me is to have insights into something that's such a modern, tragic thing. And it's literally an iceberg under the surface. Most people, you mention Lyme, they're like, Lyme, what is that? Or people call it limes, and it's like, well, it's not actually limes, it's a Lyme singular. So the best part for me is being able to have insights. And if I'm actually grateful that I had Lyme disease, because otherwise I wouldn't be as sensitive to the patients that I meet and the people that I meet. Because when they tell me what's going on, I believe them. When they say my skin is flipping, well, what is flipping skin? That usually docs say, well, you need to go see a psychiatrist or something. And this is really common with Lyme. But it's being able to have not only insights that this is what they're suffering from, but then to have anything that actually addresses it is really kind of a miracle. And that's where, for me, the most rewarding part of this is when we can go very lightly with somebody and provide almost infinitesimally small amount of bee venom, and people start getting massive results. And that's really, to me, the most exciting thing, is that when we have this sea of pharmaceuticals that aren't really working very well, from the professionals and doctors I've talked to from all over the world, these things are so persistent and they're very difficult to eradicate. And the fallout from using antibiotics is so difficult to the gut biome, which is 80% of your immune system. So it's very hard to get around this kind of stuff. But to have bee venom be able to address the entire system of the human, the little droplets throughout the acupoints, is just incredible. And to feel, from what I see now, how I understand it, having these little droplets restore the nervous system and turn that immune system back onto full function is really just incredibly exciting, because so many people get so damaged by the treatment for trying to heal Lyme disease that they have other problems that develop. And for me, I'm one of the few in the country that did only bees and bee propolis. I didn't do any antibiotics. I was able to I've used about 22,000 bees on myself over the last 10 years, and I felt essentially 100% recovered after 3 years. And so to be able to share life again with these patients, these people that are they have no hope, they're losing it, they don't have the will to live, they've tried everything, many of them are destitute, spent $500,000 on all kinds of therapies, and to be able to get them moving again with a little bit of bee venom is really, really rewarding.
Yeah. I was out to dinner the other night, and I was telling one of my girlfriends that, oh, I'm interviewing John the bee guy, and he does all this amazing acupuncture. And I'm, here I am not really knowing all about what you do, just the basics. And she looked at me and she's like, well, I'm allergic to bees, so he wouldn't be doing that to me. So I'm like, well, I'll ask him about that, because I think that you can still have it, but I'm really not sure. So John, tell us, one of the big challenges that you might have is with someone that would be allergic to bees. So how do you overcome something like that?
Well, that's a really good question, and it actually is at the forefront of my concern when doing any of these treatments on anybody. There is a few drug interactions also that you don't want to mix with. That would be anybody that's on steroids, immune suppressants, beta blockers actually can really affect the immune response. And so if people are on certain medications, then we're going to have to wait to administer any venom until they're clear of those things. Like steroids, you got to wait about 6 weeks. If somebody really thinks they're allergic, what I recommend is that they work with their doctor and they get an allergy test to verify that. And then if somebody does show up allergic, so severely allergic, then what they can do is do what's called low-dose immunotherapy, where they work with their doctor, and it's about 3 to 5 years where they go slowly and they do subcutaneous injections of what's called Venex, which is bee venom that's been processed with water and diluted, sterilized. And that's a subcutaneous, and that's quite a bit different than what we're doing. So what we do, the Hoshindo, is we're not actually doing a proper puncture, which would be both layers of the skin. We're basically scratching the surface and adding a very minute amount. So on some people, if they're confident that they're not that allergic, or if they're not sure, then we will do an allergy test. And that allergy test, generally we'll do it down around the navel, around the belly button, where there's a little adipose tissue, if you will. And we just scratch a little venom there, and then we wait for a response. And we can tell quite a lot about somebody's reactivity based on that initial, and we're using like 1/100th of a bit of venom. We're using a teensy bitty amount. But again, it is something that is at the forefront of our minds. So I never do any sort of bee venom with anyone as long as we know what medications they're on and whatnot. We'll check those for interactions. Then when we do our treatments, we're going to have, I have 4 EpiPens and liquid Benadryl standing by everywhere. And I would never do this in a remote location. I also want to know where hospitals are at nearby, so that we can, in case there was ever a life-threatening situation. Now, out of about 4,000 treatments, I've had 5 big reactions, and one was in my daughter, actually. And we were stinging with her. She had some knee injury skiing, and we were working on her MCL. And she would do maybe 1 or 2 bees every week. And then one day there was a bee in the house. It stung her in the finger. She turned beet red. Right after she turned beet red, we administered 1 dose of Benadryl, and then she was fine. That's all it took.
Besides Lyme disease, what other types of diseases or issues that people have that you could help them with using your bee venom?
So the bee venom is incredibly wide spectrum. And when I say that, it works on so many things. It's been well reviewed, well studied as neuroprotective and neurorestorative. So almost any condition that I've seen so far with nerves involved and nerve dysfunction, autoimmune, if you will, many patients with MS. MS is a really tricky one. Dr. Klinghardt, Dietrich Klinghardt, he has done quite extensive studies, and he's found that many diseases, fibromyalgia, Epstein-Barr virus, cytomegalovirus, people that are suffering from MS actually may have undiagnosed Lyme disease going on. And One of the latest great stories is a friend of ours from California. She suffered for what was diagnosed as MS for 10 years. She met one of our practitioners, and he got her on some bee venom, and she got up out of her wheelchair. She was basically wheelchair bound, and now she's been hiking 2 miles a day. It's just like, well, sometimes, you can have a disease, but the disease is really just a name of a collection of symptoms. So we're not always really sure what all of us are suffering from, but I have seen bee venom work on any inflammatory condition, psoriasis, eczema, sports injuries, neuropathies of all kinds, especially diabetic neuropathies. I've seen it work on chemoneuropathy, where you're having pain in the extremities, a little feather dusting of bee venom, and it seems to reset the nervous system. Immune function is just, it's incredible what it does. It's got to be the essence of plant medicine, because bees are vegetarian. They don't eat any meat or anything. They basically live on nectar and pollen. All of that, it gets supercharged and concentrated into the venom. The way that I tell patients to think about it is when you have systemic fires and inflammation going on, getting a little bit of bee venom is like snowing rose petals all throughout your body. It just is like, it just puts out fires and gets that inflammation really down, on top of stimulating the immune function. So it's incredible stuff to watch.
I love that idea of snowing rose petals.
Yeah.
So sounds great. Nice.
Well, it's like multitudes of flowers. Yeah.
Yes. Well, speaking of rose petals or flowers, the one thing that Lisa and I always find so intriguing about you is that you are always so chill and relaxed when you're with us, at least when you're in our presence. So we want to know the secret of how you stay present and mindful in this incredibly fast-paced world. What's your secret?
Well, my secret is listening to my wife helps.
A happy wife. I think the saying is something like a happy wife makes a happy life.
Yeah.
It is very out there in some ways. People think I'm traveling all over with bees and helping the weakest wherever I go. And it does get discombobulating. And so what I try to have a tendency to do is every morning I sit with the bees at my hives and I watch the bees. And I try to, as my beekeeper friend said, learn to speak bee. And so I watch how the girls treat each other. I watch how if a bee falls in the honey, the sisters will help clean the bee off. If a bee's trapped in a spider web out somewhere, I can put the bee on the hive and the other sisters will clean her. It's like I look at the bee for mentorship in a lot of ways because they're such a good example. They need each other. We need each other. And that's really what they exemplify. And so for me, to sit with the bees and to see how much every breath they take is for the service of the colony, how everything they do is engineered and efficiency, and that they're very fearless. They do what they have to do. They're ready to give their life to protect the hive on any given second. And everything they do otherwise is service. In fact, all of the honey that bees eat was from the bees that were before them. And all of the food they bring to the hive is for the bees that come after them. So they don't even really get a whole lot from their own work. It's from the bees before, and then that feeds the bees after, because they only live in the summer about 45 days. And so they have a very short lifespan. Being busy as a bee is something that I've really taken to. It's helped me stop procrastinating. It's helped me see that the venom, when I would do it, especially in the early days with Lyme, I would just catch myself getting things done, like the chores that my wife's asked for months sitting around. Once I got on the venom, it was like, oh, I'll clean this up or I'll do this next. And so for me, the practice is very much with the bees. It's like I have basically my nervous system has become restored because of the bees. They also helped me discover that I had mold poisoning in my house. About 5 years after dealing with Lyme, about 2019, I was not feeling well. Lungs were getting weird. And I thought, man, something else is attacking me. I better up my bee venom. And I did a whole bunch more venom. And then I could smell mold in my house. And it was just like, are you kidding me? They saved my entire family. We were able to move out. I had 1,000 square feet of black mold from a small roof leak. And it's just like, so my entire life is about the bees these days. I just sit with my bees. I listen for them. I look with them. I see what would they do? And how do they address this in their lives? It's like people say, oh, people are going to think you're strange and you better, you should just find a real job, not do what you're doing. And I just find this impossible, because what I do is helping so many people stop from being suicidal, getting back to work, getting their bodies back in line where they can make money again and have a life. It's the most rewarding thing. I can't even believe I'm doing it. I mean, I never in a million years thought I'd be doing this. But to have been given the roots of these ancient methods, the roots of ancient Tao medicine, 5-element acupuncture and the meridian system, how the organs work, inner alchemy works, what our organs do psychologically. Oh my God, it's just been incredible. It's been a deep dive inside.
Beautiful journey. One of the things that stands out, well, first of all, I didn't realize that bees had such a short lifespan. But the other thing that you said that really stands out is that they are in service to us. And really, that's true, because when you do these treatments, essentially the bee is sacrificing its life to heal you. And the first time I watched you give a treatment, I remember I was observing and I was experiencing what was going on. And at the end of the treatment, it was like you said this little prayer, and it was a gratitude for the bees that, that they performed this healing. And I really loved that there was a very conscious and sacred element to this whole process. Can you share any little tidbits about that?
Sure. In the Japanese way, the hive is the body, the queen is the brain. And so the female worker bees are actually like cells of the immune system, but they're also like cells. They're sort of like responsible for the assimilation, the respiration, the heat, and the elimination of the hive. So the queen is the thinking and the spirit behind it, and she is the one that actually follows what the nurse bees tell her to do. So they're the ones making the wax, preparing the wax with propolis, and it's really the worker nurse bees that are finding, hey, this queen is she's getting a little lazy, not laying eggs quite right. We're going to need a new queen. And they decide when to build the queen cells. And then if she lays eggs in that queen cell, then those bees will turn, only the babies that are in a queen cell will be fed royal jelly throughout their life. And that's what kind of makes, like, you can take virgin queen, if it's young enough, you can put it in a queen cell and feed it only royal jelly, which the nurse bees will do. And it'll grow into a queen that can supersede the hive. So it's really fascinating how each bee in its life plays a role. The early bees, they're the ones pumping out wax for the wax glands, and they're like little plumbers, making sure the wax is absolutely plumb inside the hive, hanging straight down. And then the cells that they put all the food in is up at 11 degrees, so it doesn't run out all over the place. The engineering and design that goes in these hives is just incredibly sacred. And it's in the Hoshindo practice, we're here as hosts of the bees. They're their own colony. We're just like Airbnb hosts, we're just there to assist and to keep them, to stay a couple of steps ahead of them, so that if they don't get swarm happy, if you don't give your bees enough room in the hive, they'll start feeling squeezed, and the nurse bees will be like, we need a new queen in order to swarm. Because this hive's getting too small. So there's just so many things that the bees are trying to show us that we have to learn from. The main thing in Hoshin is that if I'm going to be doing these treatments, we try to minimize the taking of the lives of the bees. And then when I come to the hive, I never open the hive, because I can't have the young bees. I don't want the young bees. I want the oldest field bees I can get. And that way they're next in line. So if they die, they're not going to be missed by the inside of the hive. And it's those field bees that have done their time, that are about to die, that we try to use those bees before they perish to harvest a bit of venom. And I do have a few patients that don't want to take the life of bees, And so on a typical day, any good-sized hive is going to have about 500 dead bees from age. I'll go through lots of dead bees outside the hive and find the freshest ones. So if they're freshly dead, we can still do some venom with that. And so it's not always required that we take the life of a bee. It is best to use fresh living venom and to minimize the amount of bees you actually need to consume.
And then there's the whole idea of the frequency of the bees, right? You and I were talking a couple of weeks ago, and just because code is all about frequency medicine and everything is based on the frequencies, how can you explain to everyone the importance of the bees' frequencies?
Well, and that's a really beautiful question. And it's also something as a Hoshin practitioner that's why we meditate with the bees. It's why we sit with the bees. We learn to be calm. We learn to just breathe and be there in the presence of these incredible beings. And then when we go to take the life of these bees, we're trying very carefully to just be a clean, empty vessel, to take a pure translation of their frequency and deliver it to somebody's nervous system is really incredible. And if you will, in Egyptian times, it goes all the way back 10,000 years, the use of bee venom. The Egyptians looked at the bees as being a messenger of knowledge from the other side of the veil, if you will. What's interesting is that when you transfer that electrical energy and that frequency from the bee to people, they feel it. They get a buzz. They get a little bit of a little, and kind of a key of C frequency. They get a lot of us talk about truth chills. When you talk about something that's very deeply spiritually meaning, you get chills. Well, ever since doing bees, all I have to do, I got chills right now just thinking about it. All I have to do is think about bees and venom, and I get the chills. And it's this frequency, this electrical energy that permeates all life. And the bees just have such a resonance of that it truly inspirits the cells of the body. And when people are really down and out and they got energy being sucked out of them from 10 different infections, if you will, the bees can help restore a certain amount of electrical motivation inside the body. And it's so hard to explain, but it's definitely something you feel. And that's where, when it comes down to bee venom, I always encourage people to try it as soon as they can. And then, just to experience it from the inside, because it's completely different than thinking about it.
That's awesome. So if people are really interested in having a healing session with you or learning more about you and what you do with the bees, and you do some other pretty cool things too, that'll be a talk for another time, but
sure.
You're a pretty incredible shaman and healer. If people want to learn more and reach out to you, where do they find you?
Right now, Instagram is a really good place for me. It's john.fullbright with 2 L's. So john.fullbright on Instagram. And then I have my 2 websites, johnfullbright with 2 L's.com and Tao Bees, which is TAOBees.com. Those are areas. You can also find me on Facebook. I'm out there happy in a lot of the Lyme groups. I work all over the world coaching folks, many people in different regions of the planet that are being gaslit, like Australia right now is really bad. The government is not really recognizing the level of Lyme that's existing in Australia. They're not supporting it. So people are really just satellites out there. They're like orphaned in a really complex medical reality, and when we look at the worldwide stats in the Northern Hemisphere, it's 1 in 7 people may have one of 130 infections from a tick or spider bite or a flea bite and not even know it. And so this is a really big, big deal. We really need more people. We need more eyes and ears on this. I'm working to get bee venom established globally as an alternative medicine that really is effective in these kinds of conditions. I've seen so many miracles now that it just shouldn't be so miraculous. It needs to be instituted. And my good friend in Australia, she goes to China to study in the hospitals. And as she said, every hospital tray, every doctor in these hospitals in China carries bees on their carts to be using on most all the patients. It's just incredibly widespread there. And Korea as well. It's very well respected. This is something that is, if you will, it's the universe trying to help us out in a really big crisis. And right now, this crisis is just, it's kind of like the silent epidemic. It's underneath. It's not really in the big media enough, but we are seeing some headway happening there. That's really what got me started with this, is that if I hadn't had Lyme disease, I wouldn't know what everybody's been going through. So it's been really a gift to have it and then to actually heal with it.
Well, it's been a gift to have you on our podcast, Code Conscious Conversations, and we hope this is just the first of many. Yes, we look forward to continuing watching you grow and bring this, especially here to the United States. And I'd love to see this implemented as an actual medicine that we can use. I mean, God gave us everything in nature to help us heal. We just have to figure it out. And unfortunately, sometimes it's these tragic experiences like what you had, and you're able to turn it into something incredibly amazing. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. And I'd like to give a big shout out. Thank you to you two for having me on the show. I'd also like to thank Ed Younger up in Ottawa, who's got the Be Wise Clinic, Apitherapy Center. It's the first true apitherapy clinic in North America. It's right at Niagara on the Water. Thank you, ladies, for having me on the show. This has really been special. And as I tell my patients, if you're hurting, paint it forward. Get a little bees in there. See what it does.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the C3 podcast. Find past episodes and subscribe on our website, codehealthshop.com, or Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, and YouTube.
The Code Girls appreciate discussing conscious living with inspiring guests who make a difference.
Remember, conscious living starts with conscious conversations. Until next time, be intentional, stay inspired, practice gratitude, be well, and feel the drop.